In the mid-1960s, a horrifying serial killer case hit the UK. It cast a shadow of darkness and fear over a quiet countryside. In less than 3 years, several innocent little girls went missing and were brutally murdered. The case was really complicated, and police poured in a lot of resources and manpower to investigate these shocking crimes. On December 2nd, 1964, at 9 p.m., 9-year-old Julia Taylor met a strange man who called himself Uncle Len, claiming to be a friend of Julia's mother and offering to take her to her aunt's house to collect a Christmas present. The little girl got into the car without any guard. She was excitedly thinking about what Christmas presents her family would get her and talked about this topic with Uncle Len. But finally, this so-called uncle took Julia to a pile of mine waste. He strangled her, took off her clothes, beat her continuously, and then sexually assaulted the crying little girl. It was pouring with rain and the night was very dark. After about 50 minutes, a cyclist who loved night riding passed by. He faintly heard the crying of a little girl nearby. He stopped to check if it was just his imagination. As the crying grew louder, he found badly hurt, naked Julia in a ditch near the mine waste. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the man quickly took Julia to the road, flagged down a passing van, and asked the driver to take the bleeding, crying girl to the hospital. News of this shocking and angering incident spread quickly across the region. When the psychiatrist questioned Julia, she said that she remembered noticing the murderer's car pass her aunt's house. She sobbed and begged the murderer to take her home, and his voice then turned terrifying, as if he wanted to kill her. But Julia had forgotten what the murderer in his car looked like. The investigation wasn't going well until a witness came forward and said that the murderer's car was a big one with two-tone paint and a light near the end of the windshield. Still, despite great efforts to search, nothing turned up. On Wednesday, September 8, 1965, 6-year-old Margaret Reynolds, a cute little girl, had lunch with her sister and they set off for school. They parted at a crossroads as they went to different schools. When school was out, Margaret didn't return home. Her worried parents went to the school, only to find out she hadn't arrived that afternoon. They promptly reported her missing to the police. In the following weeks, the police questioned over 20,000 people in the surrounding area and searched all houses within 8 miles of where Margaret disappeared. The newspaper printed 200 posters with Margaret's photo, urging witnesses to contact the police. Over the next few months, the police got many reports. Some people said they had seen a white man in a car trying to lure little girls in the community. However, a new missing case drew everyone's attention. 3 months after Margaret vanished, on December 30th, 5-year-old Diana Joy Tift disappeared from a street near her home. She was last seen at 2 p.m. returning from her grandmother's house, carrying a pink plastic handbag, her Christmas gift. The police and local people formed a search team of about 2,000 people. By January 5th, they had searched over 6,000 houses, gardens, abandoned factories, warehouses, ponds, and reservoirs in the area, but found nothing. On January 12th, a poacher walked along a seldom-used farm track between 2 villages to hunt rabbits. When he reached a waterlogged ditch, he found the remains of Diana and Margaret that people had been searching for. After being sent to the forensic office, the autopsy showed Diana was sexually assaulted and then smothered to death with her hat by the murderer. Margaret's body was badly decomposed. Except for a shoe, her clothes were missing, and the cause of her death couldn't be confirmed. In fact, before finding the 2 children, the police had concluded that the kidnappings of the 2 girls were linked and also connected to Julia's abduction and attempted murder. So, at a press conference, they told the media, "We're hunting a dangerous child killer who might strike again. Please keep your children safe." Then, the investigators contacted police headquarters and got help from 2 experienced ones. They formed a task force to arrest the suspect, working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. First, they focused on finding the murderer's vehicle, but after questioning thousands of cars in the area, no clues emerged. Also, the poacher who found the remains was ruled out as a suspect. Next, the investigators had to visit houses door to door to gather leads. Months passed. Though they didn't catch the murderer, they solved some cases involving the abduction, attempted abduction, and sexual assault of girls. In August 1966, 10-year-old Jane Taylor vanished while cycling. Investigators thought this case might also be linked to the Cannock Chase murders. Though the martyr's identity remained unknown, investigators were sure he would strike again. So, a chief superintendent made a plan demanding that on getting any child abduction report, officers should seal off roads in the area and nearby regions, and set up roadblocks further away. At 2:30 p.m. on August 19, 1967, 7-year-old Christine Darby was abducted. She and her friends were playing near their homes when a man in a gray car pulled up and said he was lost. Even though the children gave him directions, he pretended not to understand and asked Christine to get in the car to guide him, promising to take her home after he reached his destination. Since Christine's family didn't own a car, she got in excitedly. Her friends watched as the gray car reversed and left in the opposite direction. A neighbor who saw what happened told Christine's mother right away. Realizing how serious the situation was, they ran to a phone booth to call the police. The police quickly launched their child rescue plan and blocked off roads near the area. When questioned by the police, the witness described the murderer as a white man in his 30s with a clean-shaven face, dark brown hair, wearing a white shirt, and driving a gray car. He also spoke with a local accent. Knowing this, the police realized they were hunting a local man and focused their search in the area. Over the next few days, the police handed out 24,000 posters with Christine's photo to the public and put them up in places like shops, bus stops, and on telephone poles around the area. Each poster read, "Christine Darby, were you in Cannock Chase last Saturday afternoon? If so, tell the police." Another witness came forward and told the police that shortly after 2:30 p.m. on August 19th, he saw a gray car heading toward Cannock Chase with a little girl in the passenger seat. On the morning of August 20th, police began searching for Christine's body. As the area was covered in forests, mines, and pits, helicopters couldn't be used. Hundreds of police had to search on foot. Hours later, they found a dirty child's short abandoned under a tree. 2 days later in the afternoon, a soldier discovered Christine's body in a plantation, covered by broken branches and ferns. Christine had suffered terribly. She had no clothes below her waist. Her arms were outstretched, her legs were apart, and her knees were raised. Blood stained the grass and pine needles beneath her, indicating she was sexually assaulted there. This spot was just 1 mile away from where Diana and Margaret were found the previous year. On the morning of August 23rd, investigators examined the tire marks at the crime scene. They found the car had come from open wasteland to the plantation. After murdering Christine, the car reversed out of the plantation, leaving marks almost identical to those made on entry. A tire company manager noted the driver was skilled and experienced. 2 local witnesses reported seeing a gray car near where the body was found. The driver was a white man with dark hair. One witness detailed the car as an Austin Cambridge A60. The police then tracked every gray Austin A55 and a 60 in the area nearby. Over months, they checked 23,000 vehicles. As many drivers were ruled out, the search expanded. The investigators had to interview 44,000 owners of these car models. With the help of 2 witnesses, the police created the first colored composite sketch of a suspect in UK criminal history for the manhunt. At the news conference, they said, "We're certain the man in this sketch murdered these children. His face might be familiar to some. Maybe you're his family and know he's guilty but are covering for him. Perhaps you can't believe this seemingly good man is a killer. But remember, if he's not caught, no child will be safe." In January 1968, investigators began door-to-door inquiries again, covering over 54,000 households. Men aged 21 to 50 in each household were asked to fill out a questionnaire stating their whereabouts and providing contacts to verify their alibis on the days of each kidnapping and murder. Some men were even questioned. Only a few had solid alibis. Others simply said their wives could vouch for them. Without evidence, the investigators couldn't force further questioning. On November 4, 1968, 10-year-old Margaret Alton provided information that led to the arrest of the murderer. She had nearly been kidnapped. A man on a wasteland asked her if she wanted to play with fireworks on his car. When she approached, she noticed newspapers covering the passenger seat, but no fireworks. Hesitant, she was grabbed by the man. Luckily, an 18-year-old girl from across the street drew the man's attention, allowing Alton to break free and run away. This girl witnessed the event, noted down the car's details, a green Ford Galaxy with a cream-colored roof, and the license plate number, which she reported to the police. With this information, investigators contacted local vehicle registration officials and found the car was registered to 39-year-old Raymond Leslie Morris, who lived in a high-rise apartment building. The next day, Morris was arrested by the police. He denied any connection to the case but admitted to previously owning a gray Austin A55. However, since the female eyewitness did not identify Morris, he was released. Yet, two investigators remained suspicious of Morris as he closely resembled the published color composite sketch and had owned an Austin A55. Upon reviewing records, they discovered that Morris had been questioned 4 times between 1964 and 1968 in connection with the murders, and had initially been considered a strong suspect. Each time, his wife provided him with an alibi, leading the investigators to note in their files that Morris strongly resembled the sketch and that he only had his wife's testimony as an alibi. On November 12th, investigators examined Morris's insurance records and found that he had owned a car of the same model as the murderers during the kidnappings of Julia and Margaret. Additionally, from Morris's employer, they obtained a gasoline receipt showing that on the day of Margaret's murder, Morris did not have an alibi. On November 15th, the police rearrested Morris for the murder of Christine. In response, he exclaimed, "Oh my God, is it my wife?" His wife was also detained for questioning. Initially, she insisted that her alibi for her husband was true, claiming he had returned home at around 2 p.m. on the day Christine was murdered. However, hours later, she admitted to giving her husband a false alibi and stated that on the day of Christine's murder, Morris did not return home until 5 p.m. He explained to her that he and his manager had worked late. Then he drove the manager home and bought some cakes for her parents. Faced with this information, Morris became flustered, repeatedly refused to answer questions, and also refused to participate in further lineups. In response, the police brought the witness to the station the next day, and he positively identified Morris as the murderer he had seen that day. The investigators then searched Morris's apartment and found a collection of homemade child pornography, many of which depicted the same 5-year-old girl who was identified as the niece of Morris's wife. On November 17th, Morris was formally charged with Christine's murder, along with 2 counts of indecent assault on his niece and 1 count related to the attempted kidnapping of Alton. On February 10, 1969, Morris went to trial. He pleaded not guilty to the kidnapping and murder charges but admitted to sexually assaulting his niece. The next day, 2 key prosecution witnesses testified, confirming that the man they saw on August 19, 1967, was defendant Morris. Despite efforts by Morris's lawyers to discredit them using composite images, they stood firm in their identification. On February 14th, a police officer testified that Morris had been hostile during a door-to-door inquiry shortly after Christine's murder and had shown indifference to the victim's mother's grief. Morris's wife testified for the prosecution, contradicting his alibi. She admitted to giving Morris a false alibi out of belief in his innocence. His mother-in-law and employer also testified, further undermining his alibi. Evidence showed Morris had enough time to commit the crime on the day Christine was murdered. In his defense, Morris denied knowing Christine and questioned his wife's testimony. He claimed police brutality after his arrest and that he wasn't allowed a lineup. Regarding the explicit photos of his niece, he said they were accidental and that he was disgusted by them. On February 18th, both sides presented closing arguments. The judge instructed the jury to evaluate each charge separately and avoid letting anger over the pornography influence their verdict. After less than 2 hours of deliberation, Morris was found guilty of attempting to kidnap Alton and the sexual assault and murder of Christine. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge said, "I do not intend to keep you here any longer, nor do I intend to make any comment on this dreadful murder. As you know, there is only one sentence: life imprisonment." Morris was not charged with the murders of Margaret, Diana, or the attempted murder of Julia, but investigators and the public believed he was responsible. There just wasn't enough evidence to prove it in court. Morris was born on August 13, 1929. His childhood is unknown. In 1951, he married his first wife, and they had 2 children, but the marriage ended due to his violence and controlling behavior. At 35, he married his second wife, who always provided him with an alibi. In 1966, he was arrested for taking indecent photos of 2 female students but wasn't convicted, which might explain why he didn't commit any murders that year. Morris died naturally on March 11, 2014, after spending 45 years in prison. He never admitted to his crimes or showed any remorse. A retired policewoman said, "I'm sure the families of his victims would be disgusted. Cannock Chase will never forget what he did.